Hey, welcome everyone to our webinar here today on completely protecting your cryptocurrency asset. These are definitely interesting times that we live in right now. So one of the things we want to talk about in the webinar is about how to do remote authentication. Actually, we've seen over the last couple of days a surge of interest from companies with working from home here in the United States getting a lot more prevalent. There's actually a lot of demand in these kinds of technologies. But we actually want to start it off here with my friend and Lance Vick. So Lance, you are, first of all, welcome. I think you are one of the, if not the most paranoid person I know on the planet. And I mean this in an incredibly good way. There's very few people who think as much as you about all the different ways how systems can be compromised, what the weakest links in the chain are, and how you can improve security. Is that accurate, Lance?
Well, I like to think you kind of need to be a little bit worried in this space, but I definitely appreciate that.
So, Lance, to kick this off here, can you tell us a little bit, in the cryptocurrency industry, sort of what are the trends? What are the risks that you're seeing? What are remedies you're seeing? What's the state of the industry?
Sure. Let me jump into a slide here. So I've got a slide here. Is that MTGOX, Where is Our Money? And I want to give a little background for this discussion. I started with this 2014 slide, but I was thinking last night this pattern of behavior actually goes back much further. I'm going to give a quick TLDR history and a complete left field on bank robberies. So actually looking at America, bank heists actually go back to the 1820s, and blast-proof vaults and any type of primitive alarm systems didn't really show up until over 100 years later. And yearly bank robberies kept going up until the mid-1990s, until they reached over 9,000 a year. And we didn't see a significant decline to about 5,000 robberies a year until around 2011. Basically, it took 100 years before anyone decided to start investing heavily in security in American banking, and about another 100 years before we started getting significantly better at it. So just as the banking industry was finally starting to learn how to secure assets, Bitcoin was gaining popularity as a new asset class, and in particular, MTGOX emerged as the leading kind of bank and trading platform for these assets. Now, this is a famous case of an overconfident CEO, Mark Kerpels. He learned nothing from the survivor's bias of hundreds of years of banking. He bought someone's pet Bitcoin project, banking and trading system, named after a trading card game, and continued to build and maintain it as is, starting in 2010. He doubled down on increasing the size and scale of his business while aware of substantial design changes needed for security, accuracy, and speed. And in 2013, the head of marketing said they had plans to build a bulletproof system, but insiders shared that in the interest of keeping profits high, they didn't really bother reviewing most of their code and often rapidly shipped untested changes to the trading system. A year later, 850,000 Bitcoins were lost, including both online and offline wallets, with claims that the online wallets were hacked and the offline cold wallet simply was lost, presumably due to some kind of fat finger negligence. To put this in scale, the worst robbery I'm aware of from the financial institution before MTGOX was only around $60 million, and at peak prices, 850,000 Bitcoin was worth over $17 billion, resulting in a lot of people holding signs like the one in the slide. A big difference of storing Bitcoin versus something physical like gold is anyone can teleport Bitcoin to you for safekeeping instantly if you say you'll keep it safe for them. And if you're good at marketing or you have a local monopoly, you're going to get way too much of this way too quickly, regardless of any bad security practices or lack of insurance. It weighs nothing, and thieves don't stop filling their bags based on what they can physically carry. And the question is, it's going to take us 200 years before we get decent security this time around. And I'd like to jet over to 2020 here and see what things look like now. So this is a slide from a website called Blockchain Graveyard. They track postmortems of most of the major security breaches in the crypto asset space. I try to make everyone in the space read this as much as I can. I'm always putting it in front of people because it sets the stage for how big the survivor's bias problem is. And most people keep repeating the same mistakes. We can see that the biggest known causes are server hot wallet breaches and general application vulnerabilities, which are often one and the same. One of the most vital tools to limit application vulnerabilities is careful code review. The problem is modern development speed in the web industry is largely propped up by the fact the vast majority of code that we use in most projects is copied off the internet with no review at all. If someone does take the time to review the code that you depend on for you, they might discover a bug before you do and take advantage of it. Maybe they just take over an email account of an inactive author and push an update of their own, taking advantage of a lack of good two-factor authentication. In our research of this issue at BitGo, we determined roughly 90% of major JavaScript package authors don't have strong two-factor authentication enabled on their email accounts, which does set the, allow access to change the code that they share with the public. We started trying to inform and help some of these parties, but there's a lot of them, and there's much work to be done there with education. It seems far-fetched, but we've seen surge in cases like this where companies are blindly pulling in open source code without review, and that is specially crafted to trigger thefts only when it makes its way into a particular target crypto asset company, in some cases going months before it's detected. And in months, a lot of theft and damage can happen, right? Copay is a pretty notable example I encourage people to take a look at. We've got a whole new class of threats in this new decentralized financial system, and it's going to require a very different approach to security. So on a different approach to security, we have this idea of multisig. It's been largely pioneered by BitGo, but it's actually a core feature that's built into most blockchains. This idea that you can set up a wallet that requires more than one key in order to, and more than one key or more than one party in order to make a transaction. So one of these keys is held by us in a hardware security module supported by a platform that enforces spending policies of your choosing. Another two keys that can either be held by us offline in separate locations or by the customer depending on the threat profile and comfort. Two of the three keys are required to spend, which tolerates one key even being totally lost, which lost keys is also a big problem in this space. Often people will use different wallets or different configurations to balance risk between fast access and security, much like a retail store would do based on how much they leave in the register versus how much they leave in the vault. We feel this practice really should be industry standard. We're constantly debating, though, and researching new security layers to add to this model to make sure we're far ahead of the types of attacks we feel are coming next. When there's billions on the line, you start to attract the very well-funded adversaries, and suddenly everything starts becoming on the table. One of the biggest remaining risks is customers themselves that often don't understand or really take seriously how easily any operating system can be breached by someone with the right knowledge or the ability to buy the right knowledge. So to decentralize risk, we have to have a high level of security for the people that author the code, the key holders that sign transactions, and the end systems and users that are initiating saying they want to send transactions. Really, you have to have trust everywhere, and often we don't have it really very many places. The hardest part of the job is just the sheer number of people that really need to be educated. To illustrate this a little further, malware is really becoming commoditized now. So really, if the ROI is high enough, if there is a $50,000 exploit that can net you a few $1 million, then for somebody without any ethics, that's a good trade. If you look close at this chart here, you'll see that some of your favorite applications have a price next to it. We've got, Facebook Messenger on here. If you can have an exploit for Facebook Messenger that can remotely take over people's computers, that's worth $500,000 right now. If you have a USB exploit where just plugging in a USB drive can execute something on someone's computer, that's currently worth about $50,000. And this is just on the legal market, where companies like Zero will buy these exploits and sell them to whoever. A lot of speculation is that it's either governments or the companies that write the software. We don't really know. But there's also a lot of secondary markets and dark markets that will sell these things over and over again and use them on very targeted attacks until finally someone discovers it, makes a patch. And sometimes the life of these things can be a lot longer than we would like it to be. Which ideally would be zero. But yeah, I mean, security experts though have advised for decades that we really need some sort of authentication that is physical. People are constantly getting phished, and other things are constantly taking people's systems over remotely. But we have had credit cards for a long time, which have a chip in them, and although in America we were a little slow to roll that out, this is an example of a hardware device that people started to use, and it's taken a little longer to get that rolled out in the rest of the internet space, whereas most sites just started out with things like SMS, and that you get a code sent to you. But this hasn't been going very well either. If we look at we look at some of these headlines here, how to lose $8,000 of Bitcoin in 15 minutes. Got one here for Michael Turpin, lost $23 million. And actually, Guido, we sat right next to him on a panel talking about this exact issue of SIM swapping. People assume that these SMS codes that you get are good security. And, if you're running a fashion blog, maybe it is. But if you're holding millions of dollars and all you need is a few $1,000s to bribe somebody that works at a cell phone store to, give your number away, then this isn't that great of a security. Once upon a time, I worked at a Radio Shack for just above minimum wage and could port numbers between 3 major carriers. The system hasn't changed much since, and there's a lot of people at those stations with that access that are perfectly happy to take money to use them in ways they aren't meant to be used. I know several people personally that have been hit by these sorts of attacks, wiped out life savings, things like this. It's pretty devastating, and we really need some better tools rolled out to people overall. And of course, I believe that is better two-factor authentication is of course a huge part of this. And once again, we have an industry of security experts calling for better authentication and hardware key management, and this has been ignored by the vast majority of the tech industry, which virtually all crypto asset security systems rely on at some level today. Very few have enabled phishing-resistant 2FA or code signing at all. GitHub, for instance, allows hardware two-factor authentication and code signing, but almost no one uses it. And for signing their own commits or pushing new code, and almost never for code reviews or password management. Password management is another common pitfall. Most secret management systems expose all credentials at once. You want to make an adversary convince someone to have to do a physical action in designing these systems. If you're remotely on someone's computer and you want to steal 1,000 passwords, you should have to make them have to physically tap a button 1,000 times and hope that they notice at some point that what's going on, right? And this is where hardware security modules are so useful. And a huge part of our security model, BitGo, is designing with the assumption that any one person or any one internet-connected system can be compromised. Addressing this so far has required us to roll out these hardware security modules, in most cases YubiKeys, to a range of our use cases, including code signing, code reviews, release signing, email and document encryption, end-user login, and transaction approvals. And we're actually looking for a few new areas to roll them out as well. We're really encouraging every vendor before us and after us in the supply chain, as well as all of our peers in the industry, to adopt similar measures. Our industry is going to need some serious changes before the catastrophic hacks slow down. Hardware security modules are a clear foundation for reliable security in high-tech industries. And Yubico, you guys have got the most accessible ones, and we're really thankful for that. It's my hope with we can get better practices established in this industry without it taking 200 years. We can get a little bit faster this time. But yeah, some additional thoughts in the industry and hopefully gas some perspectives. With that, I'll hand it back off to Guido to go in a bit more depth about how these devices work and some of the common ways you can integrate with them in your workflows.
Fantastic, Lance. Thanks. That was great. So I want to talk primarily about authentication. But before I talk about these devices that Lance talked about, I want to set the stage a little bit and explain sort of the state of authentication overall, why it's important and how it's being done, and why there's sort of huge issues with the way we're doing it right now. And let's start with why authentication is important. So if you look today at breaches, of somebody busy hacking into the system, one of the recurring themes, so one of the most frequent parts of the skill chain is the theft of credentials and then using those stolen credentials. In fact, if you Verizon every year publishes a breach report where they look at a large number of breaches and what exactly happened, and it turns out 80% of these breaches somewhere involve the theft and use of stolen credentials. So in other words, if we can stop this part of the kill chain, we can probably eliminate a large percentage of these attacks. Right? I think it's a huge opportunity with relatively low effort to take out a large piece of the kill chain. So how do we do this? Well, before we go into how we do this, let's look at how credentials are typically being used today. Right? And the number one credential that everybody uses are passwords. Right? And you take a login, you take a password. You should pick a password that's reasonably long, that has special characters in it, uppercase and lowercase and some numbers. It should be unique to every website. If it's not unique to a website, then you can basically go to another one of the databases, right, where people accumulate passwords that were stolen from other websites. And if you would do this for me, for example, if you just take my personal email address and go to a website like MIPwned, you would see that my password that I've used in the past with various websites has leaked out about a dozen times or so. Right? So if I would use the same password on all these sites, you would have my password already. You could just log in. So it needs to be different for every site. There's different guidance on whether you should change it frequently. I think the consensus today is that changing the password frequently does not actually increase security by much. It prevents long-term access, but it makes it hard to remember, so it's not worth the trade-off. Now, just having login password has the big problem of being very easily phishable. So I can simply, send you to a phishing website. You type in your login, your password. Now it's gone. I could also potentially brute force it somewhere. If I get the encrypted password database, the hash password database, I can basically try to brute force these hashes. There's a lot of bad things I can do. So people came up with other solutions, and things like asking for an additional security question, for example, your mother's maiden name. And now you may say, Guido, that's a bit condescending. Nobody uses mother's maiden name anymore. That's what I thought as well, until I signed up for a new bank last year. And here's the signature card from that bank. And it actually has one of the questions, the mother's maiden name, and they are actually using this for account verification. So clearly this is a terrible idea, right? You can just, go to the German, like a register in my hometown and figure out what my mother's maiden name was, right? So this would not be a good way to authenticate me. Security questions are a pretty bad idea in general. So, for example, if you take something like, what is your favorite food? It turns out in the United States, you have a 90.7% chance that the answer is pizza, right? And, that works in other languages as well. Apparently in Arabic-speaking countries, your first teacher's name, you can guess with a 24% chance. And this sort of is a very general property. Security questions are not effective. So what else can we use? And the thing that is common today is what's called two-factor authentication. So in addition to your login and password, we require you to present one more thing if you're logging into an account or if you're at least logging into an account from a new system. One of the first approaches that came up were these time-based authentication codes, either on a little plastic dongle that you carry or on a mobile device, where basically you have an application that will show a different time code that changes every 30 seconds. So Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, there's a bunch of them, and you might have tried them before. And there's certainly a big step forward. So this is much better than doing nothing. But the big challenge that these techniques have is that they're still susceptible to phishing. So for example, if I use an authenticator with numbers, and the way I normally use this, I would go to a website, I would type my login password, and it says I need a second factor. It would ask me for this number. I would pull out my phone, I look at the number, I type it into the client, we send it to the bank, in this case, bank.com, and bank.com says, all right, authenticated, and gives me access. Now, the problem is this is still phishable. You just have to be a little bit faster, right? Because what I can do is I can send up a fake banking site, and let's call it, bank.com, but I spell it with a 1 instead of an A. If I can convince you to go to that site, you type in your login, you type in your password, I now ask you for the code, you type in the code, and the phishing site can just take that code, forward it to the real bank.com site, and now has access to bank.com and can, do bad things with your account. Now, I have to do this quickly because these codes change every 30 seconds. And that may seem like a fairly difficult thing to do, but it turns out these days it's actually reasonably easy. You can find great open source packages that combine both a web server to set up your fake website, as well as a headless Chrome instance that then will immediately leverage those credentials to log into the actual real website. So it's completely automated. You don't have to do anything, and everything is sort of pre-wired for you to set this up easily. So that's the fundamental challenge with many of these time-based authentication codes or one-time authentication codes, that at the end of the day, they can be phished easily with intermediate sites. And of course, an attack like this would also work with SMS. And as we heard, SMS has the additional problem that can also be SIM swapped. So it's overall, this is I think an idea which, at least for something that's critical to protect like a cryptocurrency account today, no longer offers you a high degree of protection. So what we at Yubico, what we're building are YubiKeys. So now here I have an example of a YubiKey. It's a little plastic dongle. It goes into a USB port. It's actually extremely robust. So you can, we've had a key that was 5 times in the washer dryer and survived. We don't recommend that, but usually they're fine. We had one that was eaten by a dog and came out the other side and it still worked. And we certainly don't recommend that, but it's a very robust piece of hardware. And the way how it works is actually incredibly easy. You basically just insert it in your computer, tap on it, and that's it. But more importantly, it's very resilient against phishing. And let me explain to you why. The reason for the phishing resilience is actually something called the Fido Protocol, Fido 2 protocol. It's a protocol that was developed by Yubico together with Microsoft and Google. It's today supported in all major web browsers. It's actually supported by many cryptocurrency sites. It's an extremely well-designed protocol. I think it's, honestly, the way I look at it is I think it's the first time since the original login password that people took a big step back and really designed, authentication protocol, not with the idea of a quick retrofit, but from the ground up, and it's very well thought through. And it has a high degree of phishing resistance, and let me explain to you why. So the basic idea is that for an authenticator, there is, like a YubiKey, there's an enrollment step. So at some point, for example, if you're using it with Gmail or Coinbase or something like that, you would say, I want to register this key as a key for my account, as a second factor, right? And usually you always take 2 keys that you enroll in case you lose one, right? You keep one at home. So when I register my key, then basically at that point, I have a private key is generated on my hardware security key, and the public key that corresponds to that is stored on the server of in this case, bank.com that I want to authenticate. Right? And here is sort of how the second factor authentication works. So basically, my bank, when it wants to authenticate me, I have the same thing, login password, and then the bank says I need an additional verification. It basically sends a large random number to my browser, like for example, Chrome. Once I have this large random number, basically Chrome will hand this off to the authenticator, and the authenticator will then simply digitally sign this large random number to my private key, and we send this back to the bank. And so the bank then knows clearly I'm in possession of the private key and therefore the authenticator because I was able to sign this random number. But there's one additional thing that happens here, which is that as part of this block that's being signed, it also uses the domain name of the bank. So actually it signs bank.com plus the random number with my private key and sends that back to the server. And that makes a big difference. And why you will see when we try to launch a phishing attack against this. So I have, I'm going to set up my phishing site here. It's called bank.com, but spelled with a 1. Now, the phishing site first goes to the server. The server sends it first asks for login password, sends it to the server. The server then says, here's the random number for the Fido protocol. It takes the random number, sends it to the client. The client sends it to the authenticator, and it returns the signature of the random number and the domain name of the server that the client is talking to, which in this case is actually bank.com, the phishing site, spelled with a 1. And where this attack breaks down is when now the phishing site takes this signed block and presents it back to the server. You now have a signature over the phishing site's name and the random number. And the bank will obviously reject that because the domain name is not the name of the bank, it's a different domain name. This may have been a little bit technical, but the bottom line of this is that basically a normal phishing attack, a normal man-in-the-middle attack, will not work against a client using Fido key. And that's a huge step forward, right? If you have, if you can't get tricked to use it on the wrong site, you can't, if you have users of your organization that may not always look at the HTTPS domain name, right? You're now protected against these types of attacks. It's a big step forward. And it's actually also very user-friendly. So, this may seem super complicated, and if you look at the cryptography here, in practice, all that you do is when it asks you to present a security key, you plug in the key, you touch this little contact on top of it, and you're in. Right? So it literally takes 10 seconds of additional time, much quicker than typing in a 6-digit code or using another technique. So we built these YubiKeys in different form factors. We have for USB-A, we have them for USB-C. If you look at the second one from the left here, it actually has two plugs. One plugs with your iPhone, Lightning adapter. The other is USB-C, so it would, for example, go into a MacBook. We also have these nano keys on the right. So these are really small YubiKeys, and they're designed to basically plug them to your laptop and you leave them there the entire time. So you don't have to unplug and replug them all the time. You can just leave them in your computer for added convenience. And these keys also work with mobile devices. So today, pretty much all Android phones and iPhones, at least the newer ones, what's made over the last couple of years, have support for near-field communication. So you can take one of the NFC-enabled YubiKeys, and if you want to authenticate, you just hold them behind the phone, so it's shown on the picture here. And then you can actually use it for mobile authentication as well. So you can, today, for example, Safari on iOS supports Fido 2, so you can use that in order to log into like GitHub, for example, if you want to do something on the go. And these security keys, they make a huge difference in actual security. So here's some numbers that were published by Google. Google did a big lateral case study where they looked at account hijacking attempts, over 350,000 accounts. So this is a really large sample size. And they basically bucketed them into different types of attack. There's the fully automated bots that just try to farm. You have these slightly more targeted ones. Then you have these super targeted ones by the real professionals that are trying to attack individual accounts one by one. And here the account take-up success rates for the targeted attacks. And you have different messages like verify initial phone numbers and SMS code and so on. And the professionals were able to target pretty much all of them. The one exception was security keys. They did not have a single account that was compromised that had a security key attached, right? And that's just a fantastic number. So you can really, with a low low amount of effort here, in the relatively cheap device, you can make a big difference in the security of your system. And today, security keys, YubiKeys, are supported by a pretty large number of cryptocurrency sites. We have some logos here that are part of our Works with Yubico program. There's others, like I use it, for example, with my Coinbase account. And you have to log into that as an additional layer of protection. But today, if you have substantial amounts of money in a cryptocurrency account, I think the best of breed solution really is to use security keys with that. Now, if you're a consumer, then using YubiKeys with Fido 2 is probably your number one use case. If you're an enterprise, it actually looks a little bit different because Fido 2 is a fantastic protocol. If I would implement something from scratch today, that would definitely be my protocol of choice. An enterprise is different. In an enterprise, in the data center, they all look a little bit like the Computer History Museum, right? You have many different generations of technology. And so if you look at an enterprise, right, we have about 80% of our enterprise users use us primarily for Fido. But the number one use case in the enterprise for us is actually still classic PIV, smart card credentials. So you can use a YubiKey also as a smart card credential. For example, if you want to use a derived credential, in the U.S. government space, in many financial organizations, you have PKI. So we can put a standard certificate on it, and it'll work out of the box, on your Windows machine or on your Mac machine. You don't need to install any drivers. If you just want to use it for authentication, it works very, very nicely without any changes. You can also use those smart card credentials for actually logging into the systems if you want. Another use case are one-time passwords. So one-time passwords, aren't quite as secure as something like Fido or smart cards, but they're still a huge step up from just using regular passwords. And the one advantage that they have is that they're very easy to retrofit. So for example, if you have a legacy VPN client with a legacy VPN server, it's very difficult to add a new authentication protocol to that. But taking something like a one-time password generated by YubiKey is very easy, because basically, you plug in the YubiKey. We basically pretend to be a keyboard. So simply, we can generate the one-time password as a keyboard input to the computer. And your VPN client is not aware that this is anything but a normal password. It just passes it through. The same for your VPN server. It just passes it through. And then in the back end, you have a radio server. The radio server has a plugin that actually verifies the one-time password and makes sure that it hasn't been used before and it's a correct one-time password. So it's a big step up in security, but a very easy retrofit case for legacy systems where you can't change logs. We have other use cases, TOTP. So if you want to use the 6-digit codes, you can actually store them for additional security on the YubiKey. Has the other big advantage. I'm not sure if you've ever changed phones and you had an authenticator app on it. It's a little bit of a pain because you basically have to unenroll it everywhere and enroll it somewhere new. With the YubiKey, it's much easier because the seeds are on the key, right? They actually can simply port them between phones. And the key that works with both laptop and mobile, I, for example, use the same YubiKey for my TOTP, like my authenticator codes on my MacBook and on my phone. I have an app in both cases, and the YubiKey just gets plugged in, and then I have access to the codes on both devices. We have other use cases. I can put SSH keys on the YubiKey if you want to log into servers. You can use it for logging into the machines, right? I'm sorry, the logging into machines with passwordless login with Windows is one of the big use cases. We have PGP, threshold signatures, key escrows. There's a lot of other things you can do with the key. It's really a very versatile security device. And I think with that, we're done with our regular programming here, and both Lance and I are available for any questions that you might have. All right, getting the first question here. So there's the question of, if I have something like a YubiKey, is there an advantage if I had a key that has multiple touch sensors versus a single touch sensor on the YubiKey? So for example, would it be more secure to use each touch sensor for a different service, or is a one-time use key good enough? And Lance, I'm probably going to take this one here. If you're just doing Fido U2F with it, I don't think having multiple touch sensors actually is an advantage. And the reason is the way the Fido protocol is built. Basically, a server has to send down a relaying party ID, and then the key essentially looks up the right private key on the key with that relaying party ID. So if I have two different sites that I'm going to, the keys would be cleanly separated between the two, right? So it couldn't happen that I can accidentally use the wrong credential for the different site or something like that. The Fido protocol was extremely well designed in that respect. It automates this process. It does it actually for a second reason, which is privacy, right? One of the things that when Fido was designed, we wanted to make sure is that it can't be used to track you across multiple websites. Right? Privacy is important to many people. So actually, the separation between sites is even stronger, so that one site can't even figure out if you're registered on another site or that a key is the same key that's registering two sites. So they're very cleanly separated. So for that reason, I think you really only need one touch sensor. I don't think there would be a big advantage of using multiple ones. All right, it looks like we don't have any other questions from the audience here right now. So Lance, let me ask you a question. So in cryptocurrency, I think there's at the moment a little bit of a philosophical debate on should I keep my money in a online platform, online wallet, where I can easily access it, or should I put it in cold storage, like print keys, put them in a safe, or have it in a crypto wallet that I keep at home to be completely independent? I mean, you're in the midst of the industry. What's your thinking around this? What should I do?
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely some trade-offs here because, I actually use Bitcoin every day to pay for coffee, and having to go home to the vault with all the alligators would be a bit cumbersome in that scenario. And so you end up having to choose between what situations you need quick access, how much you need quick access, and when you don't need quick access. And I think we make this decision organically in traditional financial systems, right, where how much cash you decide to keep on your person that you're willing to lose versus how much that you want to put away in a savings account. And either cold storage or especially multisig cold storage, which are big fans of recommending at BitGo, we think is the safest thing. And for the bulk of your funds, you should definitely invest in setting something like that up. But then if you're a trader, or again, you need to actually use Bitcoin in the market or buy something or whatever else, then you're going to want to keep some amount probably on an exchange where you have a lot of high liquidity. And so that's a trade-off that different people have different risk tolerances for. It's very common to see organizations keep maybe 10-20% in a hot wallet that they need to be able to move around and respond quickly to market changes, and keep the rest offline, requiring multiple signatures as far away from the internet as possible. But that's definitely a trade-off, and it's different for everybody.
That makes a lot of sense. And so, while I'm asking questions here, Lance, here's another one just to help people think a little bit about this. It's probably fair to say that not every account needs to be protected with strong two-factor, right? I mean, look, my local pizza place, when I order pizza, it's not that important. How do you think about this? Well, are there different categories of things that you protect? How, just for an end user, right, in your personal life, how do you categorize those? How do I put these in rough buckets and pick the right authentication methods? Or would you just take everything and then put two-factor on it, just out of, by being paranoid? Lance, are you still there?
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I was muted.
Sorry.
So, I think that, ultimately you want to go ahead and set this up in everything you possibly can, because accounts can often be used in ways that you don't expect them to be used. At a previous employer, someone actually took over the Reddit account of a C-level employee, and nobody was thinking, oh, it's just a Reddit account, whatever, and then used that account to go actually reuse the password on another system to generate a coupon code that gave out a product for $1 that was supposed to be hundreds of dollars, and then gave those coupon codes away to everyone, and on all over Reddit, impersonating the company. And then the real person that did this could then just go use that coupon code legitimately, just alongside all the other people that just discovered the promotion, right? And so, even just a Reddit account, when it comes to impersonating and manipulation and social engineering, can be used in creative ways. And so, you really want to do it for everything.
No, that's actually, social media accounts, we see that before, as I think Jack Dorsey figured out, right? That social media accounts for somebody who is a bit of an influencer are definitely targets. And those are definitely things that you want to protect.
Yeah, I've seen people have their their Twitter accounts taken over just so they can go impersonate that person and DMs and say, hey, can you send me some Bitcoin? And even going as far as doing SIM swapping attacks just to be able to impersonate someone, even when it doesn't, in order to be able to commit these types of frauds, even when they can't directly get funds out of it. So it's starting to become a lot more common.
Yeah, no, there's actually another interesting thing related to that, which is, today, for your typical Silicon Valley IT worker, and I think more and more for people in general in the industry, private life and work life are often somewhat difficult to tell apart, right? I mean, my Twitter account is in theory my private Twitter account, but obviously I tweet, in many cases when I tweet something, it does reflect back on the company, and I may do it officially for the company or unofficially for the company, but certainly there's an impact there. And so one of the big benefits we're seeing of security keys is that when companies deploy them, for their employees, the employees start using them also for their private account, right? So it's actually funny. We have our keys now in a subscription offering where you can basically just subscribe to keys. And one of the things we explicitly wrote in there is that if you basically cancel your subscription, you're no longer allowed to use the keys for your enterprise, but your employees are allowed to keep them for personal use. And the reason why we're doing this is that we found out having employees using these YubiKeys that they effectively own, right, and that they're going to keep when they leave, that means that they start using them with private accounts, which actually helps the overall security of the company, right? Because in many cases, I mean, we've seen phishing attacks, just at Yubico, where that originated by that tried originating via Gmail, right? You try to compromise a Gmail account of an employee, and then you're trying to use that, the private Gmail account of that employee in order to do a more sophisticated social engineering attack on somebody else in the company. And so basically having stronger protection for the private accounts and just a general better cyber hygiene for your employees is actually a big asset to a company. So there's a very nice side benefit of giving your employees a tool which primarily is for work, but also helps them the rest of their life.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I know, here at BitGo, we've definitely seen personal accounts be targeted and try to use against the company. This is a very common tactic I think every company has to deal with. And so for us, it's a no-brainer to say, here's a YubiKey for work. If you need another one for home or a separate backup key or something, have another one. Need one for your significant other, your roommates, your dog, have those too, because the more we can help somebody's personal life and those in their immediate circle that they trust and have them level up, it definitely helps the company. So it's a win for everyone. Yeah.
And I mean, the good news is many of these social media sites, for example, at this point do support strong authentication, right? It took a while, some of the mobile apps still don't, but the websites, like a Twitter or Facebook or, Google, most of them today you can actually use, something like a YubiKey or generally a security key with Fido 2 in order to log into those sites. And it's something I'd highly recommend to anyone who has an important social account or email account.
Yeah, and even personally, on the some sites that don't support it yet, although I always reach out to support and ask them to, I use Yubico Authenticator on my phone, which kind of emulates Google Authenticator, but lets me have those credentials in my hand and take them with me, which is, is a good stopgap in the meantime until we can get something, like Fido 2 that is actually the direction we want to be.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. Good. I think we're almost on top of the hour here. Any closing words from you, Lance? I think this was great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great discussion, and hopefully it was beneficial to people. I again encourage everybody to, especially when dealing with crypto assets, to be aware of the amount of value that you're holding and be aware of how much it costs in the market to take that value from you, and make sure that you're taking appropriate steps and measures to educate yourself and use hardware security devices where appropriate to make sure that these assets don't walk away. It's where you want to invest.
No, I absolutely agree. And I mean, the good news is I think over the last years the software ecosystem has really come together to not only make this possible, but actually make this a reasonably nice user experience. And that's something that we're very, very excited about. Any more questions, feel free to just, contact us. We're on Twitter, or send us an email. Thanks for joining us today on the webinar here. And, hope to see you again on a future webinar. And thanks, Lance. Really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, bye, everyone.